but we see Melissa as the organizer online.
Okay, Melissa just joined as me. So we're going to get started here. We got 1 minute to get started. I don't know why is it. Okay, can you see my screen now? You see a slideshow right now.
Yeah, we see you.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm recording this. We've got a decent audience of folks that are here, and why don't we get started? Let's. We've got a number of folks that are part of this key conversation, so let's just get started with the presentation. Okay. So welcome, everybody. This is Moser and Attunity. We're talking about enterprise data to the cloud and migrating those folks to the cloud. So I'm Jordan Marks. I'm the Director of Technology Solutions with Attunity. We have Bryce, Manjeet, and Tom. So I'll let Manjeet start us out and talk about how the cloud is enabled through a key partner like Moser.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. We've got Bryce, who's our Big Data Director here at Moser Consulting, Tom Lapp, who's our Virtualization Technology Leader, and myself, who's on the cloud platform side of the house. Actually, I don't have control here. Jordan, can you give me control? I can't control the screen here.
Just did. There we go. You have access to the mouse right now. Can you see it?
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
Okay, so the agenda today is, we're going to start off with some best practices and some overall high-level considerations on how you think about migrating your data to the cloud, and then we'll follow up with some discussion about the Attunity product set, and then we'll open it up to questions and answer session. So a little bit about Moser Consulting. I'll leave that to Bryce to talk about here.
Sure. Thanks, Manjeet. So Moser's been around for 20 years. We're headquartered in Indianapolis. We also have an office in Baltimore. We have approximately 200 professionals. We have a national customer base. We do work all over the country, and including Fortune 50s. And our customer base includes commercial, federal government, and state government customers. So we go across the board to all types of industries, public and private. Moser can serve many different areas. We have data solutions, which includes big data, small data, all data. I'm obviously the director of the big data practice, but we have a strong DevOps team. Development team, managed services. We have learning and training, as well as a good security team as well to assist our customers in developing the right solutions for their needs.
Okay, so a little bit about our infrastructure practice. So our main objective here is to service our customers for their needs, whether that's on-premise, in the cloud, or in a hybrid implementation. So, our approach is to deliver the right solution, the right platform, the right strategy for our customers to make sure that they're well positioned to achieve what they're looking to achieve. So we look at it from a customer-centric perspective. We believe the optimal infrastructure depends on that organization's unique goals and requirements. So some of our expertise areas in our cloud practice, they're listed here. So cloud strategy, cloud deployment, cloud migration, hybrid implementations, public-private cloud, disaster recovery, data center consolidation, virtualization, and various open source technologies. Well-versed in the three major cloud platforms: AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud Platform. So, the crux of the issue here that we're talking about today is what to do with your data. More and more organizations are amassing just increasing amounts of data across the organization, and there's a challenge in terms of managing that data, as well as developing a right strategy around how to harness value and gather insights from that data. So some of the concerns is it's created and collected, but how do you use, store, retrieve, and secure that data? So what are some of the concerns here when you're talking about whether it's a data to the cloud or a general cloud migration strategy? So who are the stakeholders? Where and how to store the data? Is some of the data going to be on-premise? Is some of it going to be in the cloud? Is it going to span both environments, and how to interoperate with that data? How to manage the costs associated with that? And is the data strategy scalable? Is what the organization is doing today going to scale to meet their initiatives and objectives, say that's on-premise, versus is that strategy going to scale in the cloud? Another issue that we commonly encounter with our customers is, can we forklift the entire data set over to the cloud? Is that even an option for some of these customers? Is it even viable? Is it even cost effective? And once it's there, what about data security? As well as dealing with concerns within the organization in terms of how does it change and where the data resides, how does that change their processes and procedures, both internally within the organization and externally with their partners and customers. So when looking at the cloud, there's this responsibility model. It's called the shared responsibility model. AWS talks about this a lot, where they talk about the cloud vendor, meaning AWS, provides security of the cloud, which composes the infrastructure, the compute environment, EC2, the network layer, as well as the storage, versus the customer. The customer has a responsibility in the cloud in terms of what are they doing within those environments, how are they managing their data, how are they securing the environment from an access and management perspective, and how are they configuring their environments. So the key question here we're talking about today is, why cloud for data storage? There's a number of different reasons why a customer might want to put their data in the cloud, but it could be something as simple as we need to place our data off-site for disaster recovery and backup purposes. Customers might want to be addressing some of their storage costs. Are they potentially replacing a legacy storage system where they don't necessarily want to fork over such a large expense in order to replace that? Perhaps the cloud is the next alternative for them. It could be also along the lines to support the data growth for their organization. Perhaps they need something a little bit more scalable, or perhaps they need to distribute their data across, whether that's in a particular region or across the world. They might have new considerations for new workloads, new projects, new objectives that they're trying to do for their business. And the cloud could potentially help them do that. There's also a concern about making sure that data is accessible across the various device types that customers and various entities that they interact with are using, as well as addressing the overall increased IT complexity that's out there in today's market, as well as sharing data with partners, vendors, and others. So through our work with our customers, we've come up with some best practices in terms of how we approach managing and doing this work for our customers. So our initial objective is to make sure that we and the customer are on the same page in terms of identifying their resources and stakeholders that are critical to a cloud adoption effort. And of course, you can plug in data in terms of cloud here. So it could be cloud data adoption, for example. So there's definitely going to be challenges that need to be managed along the way. And we've found that we've got to determine the questions, challenges, and concerns up front, and then help that customer develop an action plan in order to get where they need to be on the cloud. So what we tend to do is we recommend starting small. And the reason why is, you essentially learn through that initiative, right? You validate certain processes, you start to learn, and you start iterating and then you develop a overall process that you can implement later on. But throughout this whole process, you want to make sure that you're tracking and communicating that progress internally within the organization to ensure that the various stakeholders are aware of what's going on, the situation, any concerns, problematic areas. And then what we do is we recommend taking the approach where the scope, if that's broadened, or if perhaps it's a larger project, you kind of revisit those resources, stakeholders, and challenges, as well as the action plan. And what we tend to recommend is that a smaller scale initiative doesn't necessarily translate to the organization as a whole, because once again, those stakeholders and challenges aren't necessarily going to map one-to-one. So some of the best practices in terms of placing the data, your data in the cloud, obviously disaster recovery is probably one of the most straightforward examples. Clearly, anything happens to your data on-premise, you've got a backup, for example, in the cloud. But what we recommend is embracing DR as early as possible within your organization. Plan accordingly, which would mean that you have to make the assumption that you are going to encounter a DR situation. So you have to make sure that you actually test your backups, test your DR practices and procedures, and essentially assume nothing. Don't wait till the actual event to test to ensure that your disaster recovery is actually going to work. Maximizing value. So clearly the cloud is shifting a lot of different workloads to the cloud, but it's also changing in terms of how companies plan how they're going to actually extract value from the cloud. It could be that the cloud enables that organization to be more nimble, allows them to do things that perhaps they haven't done before. It probably unlocks some innovation, but it also changes the value proposition in terms of the cost structure, for example. You're moving from a CapEx model to an OpEx model. You're paying for the use of that cloud infrastructure, your data storage, for example, as you go. And once again, lift and shift might not work. You might not necessarily be able to move your entire data set at one time. Start small, develop a process, grow that process over time to larger workloads and larger data moves. So, the three cloud providers, which we talked about earlier, AWS, we'll start with them first. AWS is a global network of regions and availability zones. I believe right now AWS has 16 regions. Yeah, somewhere about that. So an availability zone within a region is a geographic location which are independent data centers that are connected via high-speed internet interconnects on the AWS backbone. So they're isolated from each other. So you could actually store your data in a particular region across those various data centers and not have to worry about one particular region going down necessarily affecting your data or your workloads. But what you could do for a more secure environment in terms of your data availability and your application availability is you can distribute across different regions as well as availability zones. So Amazon, AWS, some of their core features: compute, storage, networking, database, as well as some of the analytics features. So what we tend to find for customers, they'll start with an initial project over on AWS, for example. They might just want to set up an infrastructure, test a couple of workloads. It might be a dev environment, a test environment, and of course that'll encompass some sort of data move. And as they become more comfortable, it's a natural extension for them to start using more and more features of the platform. So for example, they might have some data stored in S3, and then they might want to decide to say, hey, okay, perhaps we can look at standing up a Hadoop environment via EMR. The data is already there, so there's no concern in terms of having to bring in new data sets necessarily if what they're trying to do is that data already resides in AWS. Azure, once again, one of the other 3 leading cloud platforms. Similar type of options here from the core feature set: compute, storage, networking, database, analytics, as well as Azure-specific features and product sets. Google Cloud Platform, third leading provider. Once again, the same: compute, storage, networking, database features, as well as analytics, as well as some Google Cloud Platform specific features.
Yeah, one of the key things here is that Moser has experience in all 3 of these, and quite a bit of experience. We've done major moves of data, as well as helping customers re-engineer their processes moving to the cloud. As Manjeet mentioned earlier, sometimes it's not as simple as just taking your app that you're running in your particular data center and moving it as is to the cloud. You may be able to do that, but you might not be maximizing your value. Some applications may have to be reconsidered. They might be super chatty. They might have certain data requirements that may need to be re-engineered to fully leverage their new home in the cloud. So, knowing that, looking at a particular application, looking at a particular data set, it may require some actual expertise before you actually move it up there and have it working the way you think it will work. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, Jordan, off to you.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. And hopefully you find this enlightening in the way that the considerations that any company has to go through are significant, being that this is a platform migration in some ways, and that the way that your infrastructure and your software are integrated and how they move, all those considerations become fundamentally key. And having someone that understands the nuances of each cloud is key. I feel like the actual considerations of just what is the cloud, right? We talk about this, and because a lot of vendors or consulting partners, they understand it so well. But in your business, you're helping run. You may not always be an IT company, right? You're not an IT company that happens to do X. You're in the business of driving yourself and what you guys are trying to do, and we're an enabling component of that. So as long as not only do we understand the terminology, but helping you to understand where we're coming from the terminology is key. So thanks to Manjeet and Bryce, and I'm going to go into what is Attunity and help you with the tools that you can use to build this out. I think this is where that happy point of conversation comes into a key. So as you're looking at your data and you're looking at how to integrate, not only from the integration methods, but the big data and the software, you can use different tools within the Attunity platform, and I'm going to talk to each one of them, but how we accelerate that delivery, that availability, how we automate the readiness for analytics, the structuring of the data, the preparation of the analysis that needs to occur, as well as then the optimizations of how people are using their data in the business. So I've come to working in the data space for about a decade, and so I keep hearing how you're using your data. I'm now at the point now where data is so prolific and everyone's talking analytics. It's just how do you run your business and who's doing what with your business, right? So when I look at this and I look at the overall platforms that people are building today, you often hear big data and you hear about the data warehouse and the structures for those and the complexities that go into it and the new tools that have come into it. You have a seismic shift. The cloud is a seismic shift. Big data, Hadoop platforms are a seismic shift, and their marriage of the two are creating applications that then derive what I would reference as a lack of patience from the customer. The lack of patience if you're in your own business, your own customers, people that want to get stuff really fast. And they need to build a lot of pieces together. So we've been in the business, so we're publicly traded. We've got 2,000 customers over 65 countries and about 250 people. Offices in Boston, Chicago, Miami, and LA in the US, London, Stockholm, Prague, Tel Aviv, and Hong Kong. So Attunity is available to a number of different solutions, and what we've done is we've built a platform. We call it Attunity Replicate. What I'm going to do right now is start off from a point in time and ask that if you guys have questions, I'd really appreciate it if you put your questions in the panel. And if anybody's got any, I think it'll be helpful to ask those and address those as we're going. When I share the overall platform of Attunity Replicate, we talk about moving data and moving lots and lots of data. Some of the largest big data infrastructures in the world are running on Replicate. They're using Replicate to land the data. They're using the metadata to then guarantee the validity of the data, and they're using Replicate as the trusted tool that they use to make sure that their published data is real time. We become a real-time publishing system for every data source in your business. And when we look at what we do, Replicate's a part of the overall solution. It's the ability to move any data anywhere, and that's what becomes the flagship Replicate. But when you wrap that, like we did last week with Compose, which is not only data warehouse automation, but there's Compose for Hive, which becomes data lake automation, which handles the ingest of landing of data. And then there's the Attunity Visibility Platform, which will look at those relational databases, or EDWs. So your Hadoop, your Oracle, your EDW on Teradata, your EDW on Netezza, and your mainframe, your DB2. And understanding how people are using it gives you the ability to profile and analyze. And SAP would fall under the Oracle or SQL Server, DB2, or the files in Hadoop. That gives you a holistic view of all the data in all of your business, understanding how analytics are driven. But let's look at what Replicate does. This universal availability of data to these sources, moving data anywhere. So what are the addressable questions when you're moving to the cloud? And then Jeet and Bryce addressed that from the standpoint of the BI applications, right? There's very centered ways that you can look at sales orders and look at inventory on hand and procurement, and you can look at marketing spend and marketing yield and web analytics. And I could go on for a long time, all the way out to actual IoT use cases that are embedded analytics. You could have relational databases or NoSQL databases stored embedded inside your car, in your cell phone, at a cell tower, at the hospital, off your EMR system, out to the device that's your Fitbit when you're walking around the yard. There's lots of different databases that need to be ingested. And Attunity is a backbone for being able to replicate that data across. It's the overall use case for that high data, high value, high gravity data. And so this is where we help folks with this lift and shift story. And that's what we talk about: simplifying, accelerating, and delivering migration. Whether your data was living in a legacy warehouse or a mainframe, or it was built in a legacy platform that needs to be upgraded, we can help you with the migration, not only to a new upgrade of a location or to a new platform that helps you with this overall ecosystem. And that's where Moser comes in. Where you have the EDW optimization and the migration. You can prioritize the archival, the offload, the storage costs, and the rest of those components as you're going. So let's use a Teradata offload use case. What we're doing is we're going to move Teradata into Microsoft infrastructure, Amazon infrastructure, Google infrastructure, and you want to move your on-premise ecosystem into other systems. Here's a use case for migrating on-prem to the Teradata cloud, or digesting or diverting ingestion to a new Teradata platform, or going from one cloud database to another, or back, vice versa, etc. Lots of different use cases. You could take dev to test migrations and offloads and workloads, looking at the migration of what the production workloads will look like, and using visibility to assess that. So you have into Teradata on public clouds. You have integrations with partners like Moser. You've got the ability to do BI, and you have the ability to do change as it goes. So lots of different deployments in these scenarios. You can have both like data that's living inside your data lake, coming off all these systems, that then gets shipped to these deployments. And there's multiple warehouses because they have multiple questions they can ask. When I was an architect, Bryce and I have worked together in the past, and when we were architects, we were looking at one cloud strategy that was a field level, helping people that were like a district manager of a local store or grocery or whatever. They would work together. Then they had a strategy that would work at the store level, and that would come off of another data warehouse. And then you had the enterprise reporting at the headquarters. So you had a cloud strategy of loading data into one warehouse for the district managers, one cloud strategy for loading each store, and one on-prem strategy for your data warehouse and home office. So there's lots of different ways that people can structure that. And what did that data center migration look like? What do those workloads look like? And what were the tools that helped them to do that across regions and providers? So where did we come from and how do we partner? So we've got partnerships and relationships to all the major cloud providers at Attunity. We also have that enterprise-grade replication technology to help you from your on-prem sources, and that ability to take that on-prem high-value, high-transfer throughput scenarios and be able to help you with that cost estimations and the actual profiling of the velocity of the data that you want to pull. And so that breadth of sources and targets becomes fundamentally key. Helps you with the configurable batches that you need to move and everything else. So what is Replicate? What are on the outside? The outside are these different data sources, these Hadoop, relational, etc. But then in the middle, there's the file channel, which is our in-memory database. It's our platform backend that what we all say is you have lots of different use cases for different types of moving back and forth, but we also talk about the value of our platform being the caching and the optimizations that help support that overall story. And a lot of use cases then derive another point where you take in two endpoints, such as you want to load from file channel, you could do it in multicast. So that means you could go in two directions at once. You could do a real-time scoring and load into a Kafka or an Event Hub or a Kinesis or a Pub Sub on Google, or you could then dump it directly to the object store or to the Hadoop vendor. And you have a platform that can help you control, manage, and administer the platform integration of different technologies into your cloud strategy and your on-prem. So that's what we talk about with that whole automation and management. That gives you a lot of the metadata around each job, but then a holistic view of all the jobs that are running to help support this overall strategy. Why Replicate? Well, I mean, personally, I'm biased. I work here, but why Replicate in these large environments? Well, the way we are installed, being that we're agentless, creates a huge advantage for customers. You don't have to have the DBA call the systems guy to install components on that source system. You don't have to have a very highly skilled DBA understanding every little piece of this integration. Replicate makes it easy. So this is where a tool that has that level of automation, that level of metadata, helps the people that do know, help them to administer and correct and adjust the different components. These are the different tools that people use to drive this. So there's a universal pane of glass, as we call it. It's like one connector. See on the left, you've got the drop source input and the target on the right. I mean on the bottom, so on the left side, the source and the target, sorry. But to the right of them, you have all the different sources that we can connect to. And bring those mass migrations. When I talk about what we've done this year, the SAP and mainframe all the way on the right at the top, those sources, those migrations of your existing mainframe into a cloud and big data environment. This becomes a fundamentally key part of that overall story. It becomes a strategy for migrating all this data. It becomes a strategy for loading all of this metadata, and it becomes a strategy for being able to source from it from a very easy and cohesive way. Also, the whole Hadoop integration, the migrations that people want to do into Hadoop and how they build out their big data lake and supporting that. And then they also have data warehouses that we want to be able to load and those supporting infrastructures around it. Lastly, there's the operational aspect of SAP HANA and, for instance, your MongoDB databases and messaging those. So we deploy all this. You have, like, for instance, an EC2 cluster. You've got Redshift and a relational database and a DB2 on there. You could use your on-prem server to connect them together. It's not that the actual metadata of Replicate or the data is flowing back to on-prem. It's that Replicate configures the jobs, gets the metadata, gets out of the way, so a natural runtime of both the relational RDS, for this example, could go to Teradata or the DB2 or the DB on EC2 or any other Redshift. So it's about the connectivity and the sample use case of being able to have a very secure, a very powerful connection, being able to connect to the same region and localized components. And in this use case, Teradata and ODBC TPT are built under the covers to be able to optimize that use case, if that's such a use case. So what do we support? What can we load into? We've got data warehouses on Teradata, Netezza, Vertica. We've got Oracle, MySQL, and Microsoft SQL Server, which we've been embedded within since 2005. We've been a key partner helping Microsoft with Oracle SQL Server migration. Or how you host it. What are the virtual machines? What are they structured? What Hadoop platform are you on? Are you using Kafka? And how do you want to store this? How do you want to load it in? So you have network file stores that are key and powerful. With regard to Amazon, you have the Redshift data warehouse. You have the relational RDS. You have EC2, which can then host the AMIs. Elastic MapReduce processing on top of those S3, those storage vehicles. And you have Kinesis and the analytics that go with those real-time applications. Alongside that, we can move to the Microsoft. And we talked about the different components of the compute and the different tools, but these are supported places we load into. We load into Data Lake Store, which would be a hosted version of HD Insight, which would be a hosted version of Hadoop. So you can take the SQL Data Warehouse or the classic S&P SQL Server. You can host another database on the Azure VM. You can load into the HD Insight. You can load Event Hubs. All these are sources. Or actually, all these are targets of all this infrastructure. And what we're going to do is the Google Cloud Platform, like BigQuery or Cloud SQL or Compute or Dataproc or PubSub or Cloud Storage, all of the above. So all these infrastructure key plays are part of your overall story and how you want your landscape. All three of these clouds, too, can support a very robust ecosystem. And one of the things that Replicate does, and this is something that I've heard from Gartner, is that they support a non-vendor lock-in story. So if you want to support different workloads and different computes and different scenarios on each one of these different tools, you can do that. And I think that's one of the key things that we're here to be a very application-centric and processing-centric tool set that helps you to process a lot of these data sets. So in another cloud story, and I think Amazon being that it's really a market leader in this overall infrastructure, we've got some solutions not only for Amazon Redshift, because this platform works in Teradata and SQL Server and Oracle and other platforms, but in the use case for Redshift, we can use Compose, which is our solution for ELT automation. I don't really like calling it ETL, I call it ELTL, which means what we're going to do is we're going to be able to transform it, keep it in a flattened state to support the type of compute. Because in today's world, you don't need this whole 3NF relational database, but what you do need is you do need to be able to model your data. And you need to be able to look at the business process and drive that out. So if you want to be able to design these tools and design the best practices, transform the data you need to, and then propagate the data back from source to the rest of the tables, you need to be able to use a tool that can do all that. Compose does that, leveraging the replication of Attunity Replicate, sourcing from all these systems, and bringing all that data together. All of these are key when you're building out your data warehouse strategy, and a lot of these take custom tools and new ETL tools that are available. So why not consider Attunity for both the on-prem and in the cloud solution that can bring all that content together? Here's a use case for us consolidating a data warehouse. You could take this from actual deriving from the source, the actual data model, building out a compliant data vault infrastructure and data model, and building out what are the entities, what are the columns within, and what is the meaning of them, and then building data warehouse supporting each one of those. I can generate ETL code. I can then also, which is SQL, but it processes natively into the platform, generating constructs to support different levels of detail. Sales would have different levels of detail than marketing. Marketing will look at all A/B tests over year, and it would be very large queries, versus sales, which are aggregations at a point in time, or accounting, which figures out things at a different interval and a timestamp, because your close periods are different at a monthly interval than potentially the month-end type processing. So as you look at this, you have different ways that you ask questions about how data is processed, where data is processed, how you can handle relationships, and how you extract that data. So it's speed to agility and speed to delivery that becomes key. And we have a Philips Healthcare help them to transform 35 million records and each interval of data in just 90 minutes. So key customers. And Fanatics is another one where they brought their own license, set it up the data, and loaded it consistently with zero downtime. And I think that's key when you're looking at different tools and helping you with that evaluation. We've brought a number of different customers when they've used their on-premise tool sets and then migrated their data to the cloud. We've been key for allowing that to be a seamless transition, something very easy and comfortable for them to be able to do, to be able to load and move all this data along. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the floor. Bryce, Manjeet, let's look if we have any questions. And do you guys have any questions? I know we got a couple of people here, so I'll take any question you guys can ask us. Well, I got a question for you, Bryce and Manjeet. So as you've seen a lot of the customers go to the cloud, or at least have these cloud-centric conversations with you guys, when you guys are coaching them through that overall process, how long should customers expect the whole migration to take? Do you guys give them years? How do you go through the process of looking at it? Because I know everyone's different and everyone's got a different strategy, but give me a sample use case of how you guys are taking customers down this journey. It's not that easy.
No, it's not. And, you know, every client is different, every environment is different, and their needs are different. So, you know, it depends on how much data they're looking to move and how quickly. Is it operational? You know, do they depend on that? Or is this more of a dev effort? Yeah, risk tolerance is really key. So as far as walking them through, I mean, pretty quickly we'll have an idea of how long it will take to move their data. We're talking like after 1 or 2 sessions. But it's the things that we talked about before about can we just forklift our data and our application, right? Some of those conversations are going to take, those are going to be really revealing as to are there gotchas, you know, the things that weren't considered. Can we just move our data to the cloud and have everything be okay? Sometimes you can. Sometimes there's going to be some extra work that needs to be done. And it's better to find out before you do it than after you do it.
Yeah, and so through the projects that we've done for our customers, you know, we talked about those best practices that we've eventually come up with in terms of how we approach the problem with the customers. You know, there have been instances where customers thought they could bite off a little bit more than they could actually chew, which has led to a lot of friction within the organization, a lot of problems because perhaps not all the right teams were involved in that process. So we always recommend starting off small, as we talked about earlier, with the goal of trying to learn from that effort. So, and once that's done, you know, the organization as a whole, as well as that individual project, will be better positioned to see their migration, their data move become successful.
Right, but we've had data migrations take as little as a couple days to, you know, a couple months, depending on the size of the data, the complexity of the data, and what they're doing.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Okay, we just had another question come in. All right. We have a question, and let me read it out to you guys. Right now I have a custom FTP server set up that our customers upload files to, and my coworkers have mapped a drive, mapping the route to all of our customers' folder in their PC. What would be the best way to get this on a cloud server and have everything hosted outside my office? Manjeet, do you want to take that one?
So could you restate the first part? Didn't quite hear that part.
Yeah, sorry, I'm fighting off a cold. Right now I have a custom FTP server set up that our customers upload files to. My coworkers have a mapped drive to the root of all of these customer folders so they can pull all that data that the customers upload from that folder that they're FTP'd there. And they want to figure out a way to make it so not only can their customers find a cloud server, but something that's easily hosted outside of their firewall and something that they can integrate to. You have a good recommendation on how to do that? Or maybe we can talk about different file share systems that are enabled by the cloud, such as Box and Dropbox, as well as other tools that are shared file store. Because you have, even in Amazon, there's platforms for doing that, right?
There are publicly available platforms, but when it comes to pure cloud solutions, such as, you know, putting your data in Azure or AWS or Google, you know, the big consideration here isn't so much the file structure, it's authentication and authorization to that data, right? So that's going to be the key critical component. Tom, Andy, you guys have anything you want to add to that? Okay. I think I covered it pretty well then. Look at that.
So I'm going to add some history to the Attunity portfolio of products, where there is a tool set called Repliweb, which we have sold, and part of the backbone for all that WAN optimization we talked about is being able to migrate files inside your firewall into and secure and authorize that whole infrastructure. It's called Repliweb. We'll follow up with you and talk to you about that and how it's helped enterprises. That product is now the foundation behind Replicate, which we talked about today. So I have another question here that's an interesting one. So this individual says, I am with a public school system preparing to migrate our current ERP to a cloud platform. Are there any solutions that you overview that are the best fit for a project of that scope? So I'm going to take this from the Replicate side, from a product vendor side, and then I think there's considerations from the consultative approach on how you want to be able to tie out the data, how you want to be able to manage it, both the logical structure of the data and the other way. So Attunity's mapped the SAP. If you have SAP, we've done an incredible job building a platform that helps you with SAP migrations. I was just at DataWorks talking with Verizon around this last week on how we help them migrate all their data, and we have a number of customers. We help them with the natural ERP, so whether it's your EBS, we help people, whether it's your PeopleSoft, your financials, your GL, your master data, if it still remains inside that PeopleSoft, we help a number of customers. And both the Replicate and the Compose products help solve that. So I think, Manjeet, Bryce, how would someone who's a local school system look at their ERP, look at the other systems, and migrate from the cloud, and how would you help consult them to approach that?
I mean, you get to look at this is a typical, it depends question. What systems do you have that you're wanting to move to the cloud? What you want to move your databases and your applications? Do you have, web servers that you need out there? What is it that you want out there? The approach is, when you think about a lot of these cloud vendors, it can be anything from it's essentially it appears like your own VM in the cloud, or it can be, you can go all the way to their software as a service platform. So it really just depends what parts you're using and that you want to get moved out there. If you want to do everything, there's you can do everything from your mail server. I don't know what particular. I don't know if you're a Microsoft stack or someone else, but you can do Outlook 365 for that kind of stuff. But really, we need more detail to better answer this kind of question.
I agree. I mean, there's a lot of complexity here, and I think it's good that you naturally have a key approach to getting down to the deductive reasoning of what the point of to pursue would be. So does anybody have anything new that, any other questions? I think we're running out to about 10 minutes, and love to answer any more new questions, so we'll give it another minute and see if anybody's got any more. Manjeet and Bryce, do you have any questions or anything that you found interesting?
No. What I did want to say was, looking at that Replicate, that universal data approach, that's very impressive. Replicate is incredible. It's essentially just data. It's a really good data pump, right? Very, very good data pump. And it's very impressive, and a lot of the systems that we've worked with, we've been connecting between those sources and those destinations, and so it's, we're a partner because we enjoy the product. We appreciate the flexibility and the power that it brings.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking for one more question. If anybody that has one, please share. Otherwise, we've got about 10 more minutes left, but I can give you guys back some time in your day if you'd like. let's give it one more minute, and then we can call it. And just so everyone knows, this will be posted up on a shared YouTube channel between the two of us, so that you can share the link and discuss, and hopefully that different folks that you work with in the business and different folks inside the enterprise can look at this and look at this as an example of how a core partner, how it requires two key things. It requires a product company that can help you with the underbody, but you really need someone that understands what's going to go into all this migration. What are the components, the tools, and the folks that are required? What is the skill sets and the rest of those platform thoughts that people need to have when they're migrating to these overall infrastructures? Okay.
All right, thanks everyone.
Seems like we're winding it down. Thank you. All right, well, I'm going to end the webinar here, and then I will send out a link shortly.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.